Holy cow. This place is amazing. Wow. You gotta check this out. I'm gonna flip this around so you can see.
By February 1865, the stalemate around Petersburg had entered its 8th month. Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant began to stretch the Union battle lines to the west in an attempt to get General Robert E. Lee's understrength army to do the same. One such move would take place along a stream called Hatcher's Run. Today we see this stream and the hidden earthworks for the first time.
In February of 1865, General Grant has 3 delegates here at City Point where I'm at right now. And those delegates are here to talk peace. They're from the Confederacy. Alexander Stevens, Mr. Hunter, and Mr. Campbell. All 3 of these men are saying they want peace. And President Lincoln does not want to have a conversation with those men. Grant expresses regret and says that he thinks that conversation should happen. Lincoln eventually agrees, and on February 3rd of 1865, he has that conversation with them, but there's 2 stipulations. They fold back into the Union and the complete and total abolishment of slavery, which those men are not willing to listen to. They fully 100% believe that they are a nation. They are fully committed to that idea, and they are not willing to let go of slavery either. With that, Mr. Hunter talks to the president directly and says, "Mr. President, if we understand you correctly, you think we of the Confederacy have committed treason, that we are traitors to your government, that we have forfeited our rights and we are proper subjects for the hangman. Is that not about what you imply? Lincoln thinks long and hard, and he pauses. And for a moment, it doesn't seem like he's going to give an answer. But then he looks up at the men and he says, "Yes, you have stated the proposition better than I did. That is about the size of it." And with that, the possibility of peace and the separation of those two countries will be forever done. It's not going to happen, and they know it. So they head back across the river and are gifted a bottle of champagne. And on the way across that river, someone yells out to the men that are in that boat, "You can keep the champagne, but return the man rowing the boat." The man rowing the boat would be a former slave that is now free thanks to that abolishment of slavery in the South, and eventually thanks to the ratification of the amendment. This leads to Hatcher's Run. Today we're at a location called Hatcher's Run Battlefield. And this place has been saved by the American Battlefield Trust. It's a beautiful place to stop and check out. It's a very peaceful, quiet, serene countryside. But in 1865, the major conflict that we're going to talk about out here, that was not the case. This place was anything but peaceful. And Grant saw an opportunity to force his way into the lines over here and to make ground on Robert E. Lee, who had been entrenched in Petersburg for the better part of 1864, really. So we're going to check out what this place has to offer so that you can see for yourself what you can see here at Hatcher's Run. General Grant would later admit, "I was afraid every morning that I would awake from my sleep to hear that Lee had gone and that nothing was left but a picket line." That's what he was thinking about out here after months and months of trench warfare. He was afraid that Lee was going to pack it up and get out of here because he was probably thinking of it from the perspective of a general himself. Had his army been bogged down and trapped in a place where it could not get supplies, he would pack up and leave too. But Lee had a lot more problems than just worrying about supplies. He had to worry about Jefferson Davis, and he had to worry about the people of Richmond, and he had to worry about Braxton Bragg. And even in February, after this battle's over with, he reaches out to Braxton Bragg and lets him know, if we cannot get supplies to these troops, if I cannot give them clothes and food, there will be no army. And yet still, supplies did not come in. at the rate that they needed to come in. Longstreet had suggested that they leave these trenches. He had suggested that they move out and meet up with Johnston. That never happened. So now if you're looking at the American Battlefield Trust's website and you look at the map that talks about the battle that happens out here, this modest home that's behind me is the Clements house. Now, on that map, there's a little black square, and that's where you can kind of give yourself some orientation as to where you're at. Duncan Road is just ahead of me in that direction there. The Confederates are actually back here, off in the distance. They're behind trenches. They are dug in and prepared to fight, but they're not packed in tight because the Confederacy's been losing a lot of soldiers. Lee knows that. Gordon knows that. Matter of fact, Gordon talked about soldiers in some places being 15 feet apart. That's a pretty wide gap, even inside of breastworks. That's a huge gap in men. And later on, Gordon said that their men were 37 miles apart. And he said it would take 2 days to move troops from one end to the other. So just imagine that. If you needed to get more reinforcements to come up, you're probably not going to get them in time because it takes them so long to march here. It's pretty amazing. But the property itself, there's not much to it. And I'll take a walk around so you can see what the building looks like. But it's a pretty swampy area out here, and this building's in bad shape. So there's no going inside. Not wanting to wait for spring, Grant decides to start another offensive. And he has to get his men out and fighting real quick because he wants to keep Lee busy. He doesn't want to give him time to think about whether or not he should stick around. Remember, we talked about him being worried about Lee leaving. He thinks he's got him right where he wants him. And realistically, he's not looking to get Lee to go on the run and head toward Appomattox like what happens. He's looking to surround him and cut the supplies off and make him surrender like what happened at Vicksburg. That's not going to happen. Lee, somehow, even this late in the war, still has the ability to kind of almost predict what his enemy is going to do. The soldier on the other side comes from the same cloth. They understand each other, and they grew up with the same tactics, if you will. So he knows that Grant's about to hit him. He can see movements that are giving him indication that there's going to be another offensive. So why exactly are we here at Hatcher's Run? Well, the Confederates are here because they had to extend their lines out. The Confederates are here because they need the South Side Railroad. If that railroad goes away, there's no way of getting supplies in here other than a few roads that are coming in and out. And that's a trickle of supplies. And when you're talking about an army of any size, you need thousands and thousands of pieces of equipment, clothes, food, thousands of pounds of gear on a regular basis coming in and out. And even with just one railroad producing that stuff, it's not enough. And he knows that. His army's starving. So he's got to keep it open. So they extend their lines out. And the entire right flank, the extent of the right flank is right here in front of me, where those trenches, those earthworks are going to be when we get over there. Pretty amazing. So Grant's been getting intelligence that supplies are coming up on Boyd Plank Road. And he's being told that there are wagons on a regular basis that's feeding this Confederate army. So once the lines are extended out, they decide to send the 5th Corps up in this direction to the Boyd Plank Road. When they get there, however, they find that there's only a few wagons that they can capture, and there's not a lot of activity going on that road. Grant realizes he's been misled by his intelligence. The Private James L. Bowen was in the 37th Massachusetts that day when they decided to go to the Boyd and Plank Road. And he describes marching and countermarching all day long up and down that road, trying to get into position. And, he's a private, so he really doesn't know exactly what's happening that day. He just knows he's going back and forth in circles. So it can be very frustrating. But then he later writes, they acquired the faculty for doing with great rapidity the building of these earthworks, because once they get there and they realize that the fighting is not going to take place and they're not going to capture the wagons like they had hoped for, they now had to throw up quick breastworks because there was about to be a fight that's going to be brought on by their activity. They said large trees were cut down, the trunks trimmed, and rolled into place, while other squads in the detail very quickly threw up dirt, and a headlog was put in place. That's how they quickly put together these breastworks that still today, some of them are up. They are still visible to the eye today, even the quick ones. It's pretty good work at that point. They're very well adaptable. They know exactly what they're doing. Well, history is not for the lighthearted. Sometimes when you come out to these locations to film or document the stuff that you see, you have to deal with mud puddles and ticks and all kinds of good stuff. And today, I'm working with about 2 to 3 inches worth of snow out here that I thought was going to be melted off by the time I got here, but I guess not. So, here we go. Well, a lot of difference a couple of weeks will do you. So I've been dabbling around trying to get the best angle for the storytelling out here and to pitch the story about what happened at this place. And the signs that were out here recently, that when I came out here, were marked the Civil War Trust. And I actually have those old signs in previous footage, which I'm going to populate on this video. But as I walk out from past the gate here to come back out here to cover down on some more of this story, now that I'm better prepared for it, I notice a sign off in the distance, and I'm like, man, I've never seen that sign before. And then I get around the corner, and I see dirt thrown up against it. Looks like a fresh dug hole. And I am fairly certain within the last week or so, fresh signs have been put up. And they now say, American Battlefield Trust. And this sign here actually covers the 5th and 7th engagements out here for Hatcher's Run, which there really wasn't much talk out here about that in the previous signs. So this is pretty neat stuff. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of battlefield orientation here in a second. I'll flip this camera around so you can see where I'm at. And we'll talk about the Confederate soldiers before they go into the fight on the 5th and the 6th and the 7th. All right, battlefield orientation at Hatcher's Run. So, right up front here, when you go down this path directly ahead, you're going to run right into the Confederate earthworks. They're off in the distance. We were out there for the first time the other day. This is where the main line is, and the extreme right flank is there, and it curls back around, and that's off in the woods, and you'll see that in this video. When the Confederates come out of those earthworks to start the attack, they are approaching from this direction, and then they line up off here, and we're talking about an angle kind of like this, way off in the distance. It's a huge line. So it's not like the whole entire line is out here captured within these woods. But the line, like I said, is angled off like this. And then eventually, that line wraps back around down through Duncan Road. And if you look off in the distance there, out where that van is, Duncan Road is just on the other side there. Those men wrap around like this and eventually turn in this direction towards the Union soldiers who are off in this direction. Now, what brings this on, like we were talking about, is the activity over a Boyd Blank Road. And that activity lets them know that a fight is about to take place. So that's what brings out the reinforcements, and that's what brings the troops out here to prepare for a fight. So now with all this activity out here, General Lee realizes he has to reinforce A.P. Hill. So he sends up 2 divisions of John B. Gordon's men up here to reinforce Hill. Major General Henry Heth and General Clement A. Evans moves south towards Hatcher's Run. which is right off in the distance over here near where we're at right now. And they get into position for this fight. About 3:45 in the afternoon, cannon fire just erupts from out here in the woods in front of me. Explosions going on all over the place from this frigid environment. Now, can you imagine being the Union soldiers out in this area? You know a fight's coming. You just don't know when it's about to happen. And then all of a sudden, the Confederate cannons just let open and just start blasting cannonballs all across this field from out of the woods. And so this place, like we just described, it's kind of like the wilderness at that time, but the leaves are gone. So there's a little bit more visibility. A lot of trees have been chopped down out here because they needed the trees to build the breastworks, and they needed the trees for fires and things like that. So it's a little bit more open, but there are still a lot of wooded areas out here. And if you're across the way and those cannons go off, it's very disorienting to hear that noise and to not know where it's coming from. You know where the enemy is, but you don't know if they've gotten right on top of you or not. And then it goes off. Boom, 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 one after another. This whole area. It's probably the most noise that this area has ever had. So Union General Thomas A. Smith had set his men up, and he'd been watching the activity of the Confederate soldiers all day and watching what they've been doing. And these Confederates let open that cannon fire like we talked about, and Heth's division comes out, and it's ready to go out into the fight. And they start advancing towards Smith. And these men, all they got to do is just sit there and wait on it. That attack is about to get them full force. Now from this line that we're at right now, Evans advances straight ahead. And you have Heth, who's going to advance straight ahead as well, but then he's going to turn to the right. And eventually he's going to try to hit that flank of the opposing men. And as they're advancing forward and firing rapidly as they're going, McAllister all of a sudden shows up, and he ends up blocking the way. Robert D. McAllister's men have a sharp exchange between them and the Confederates that are out front. That sharp exchange is enough to slow everything down. And now the Confederates are in a full fight. It's bad enough that they have to fall back to their lines. So these men that have advanced probably a mile or more down this way fighting, that are now stopped, frozen in their tracks, have to come back this way, and then they have to head back to their lines right in front of me here and end up on the other side of those earthworks for protection. It's a pretty amazing scene that unfolds out here. So I've never actually gotten out this far towards Hatcher's Run Battlefield and the earthworks that are out here. So today is going to be a first for me. And I'm coming up on it now, and holy cow. This place is amazing. Wow. You got to check this out. I'm going to flip this around so you can see. All that frozen water down there, and then these tall breastworks that are behind me. Wow. Let's go on the other side and see what they have over here. Man, these things are massive. Holy cow. Oh, it gets even better. All right. Now check this out. I don't know if you can see this or not, but the earthworks, the breastworks stretch out in a long line here, but you can see how they jet out in this direction, and they go all the way down like that. There's several locations where they're just kind of jetted out and back off in this direction too. Stretching all the way down this way with a large moat that comes out this side. So this is the defensible side. This is where the Confederate soldiers are on this side here. And they're facing in that direction towards Duncan Road. Man, I tell you, it doesn't get any better than this. So out here at these earthworks that just came up, out of the blue, you can see that line that we were pointing at earlier that runs all the way down this direction. Right down here, I don't know if you can see this or not, there's another line that comes out like this, and then it curves back a little bit. And we're going to go back in here just a small amount so that you can actually see what the head level, the height level is, and the curvature of those works that are still in there today that run all the way down this line called the Hatcher's Run line. This is a pretty neat perspective to be able to see because a lot of these don't exist anymore. All right, so I'm walking off here in all these briars and stuff. I'm trying to keep my feet off of any of these earthworks. But you can see as we move along here, that small curvature that comes up. You can see another curvature that's in the ground here, that's a lower depression that creates that height of this earthwork. And now moving along, again, there's the earthwork, curves this direction, there's the height. Now, the further out this way I go, the better the earthwork is, the bigger it is. And check this position out. That breastwork wraps around this tree and goes back towards the main breastwork here. This main breastwork, you're not going to be able to tell by perspective from where I'm standing. But I'm standing here. My head is level with the top of this breastwork. at this area. That's how very well preserved this section of the Hatcher's Run line is. And the further and further out this way you go, you find more and more and more of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, off in the woods, you'll see little divots like this here. Small divots all throughout that are basically rifle pits, where men would dig out rifle pits behind the area and hunker down inside for an eventual attack, if one was to happen. Now, General Meade was impressed by the actions out here. Not impressed in, wow, we did such a great job, but impressed in how much of a fight the Confederates are putting up. They think this end of the line is pretty weak. They had no idea that Lee was going to anticipate what was happening over here and reinforce these lines. There's more men than they could have actually counted on being out here. Now, the second part of this, that's the most troubling part for Meade, a lot of the men that are fighting out here, those men have not experienced real combat like other men have on the road before. They have experienced a little bit of trench warfare, and that's about it. And some of them that are fighting alongside of them are very well experienced, but they are battle worn. They're weary. They're tired. They are not ready to go into a fight like this. So you have a bad mixture out here of people that are just too tired to do it, and others that are too scared to do it. Now, off in the distance here behind me, Meade orders up Frank Wheaton and Hartromp's men. And he orders them in place as quickly as he possibly can. And both sides end up watching each other with an uneasy feeling the entire time until the next afternoon. So now we're moving on till the next day before the fight even kicks back off again. And these guys are at a stalemate. It's not finished. Good old Governor K. Warren. He is a part of this fight out here too. And Governor K gets himself a bad rap by the end of the war, but at Gettysburg he turns out to be a hero for all time. Well, out here he's a hero too. He predicts the fight is going to be a lot harder than it needs to be, and he ends up bringing up Roman Ayres and General Sam Crawford to probe this area to see the strength of the men that are fighting out here and to see what all needs to be done. And that is what brings on another general engagement. So now that we're out here at the breastworks, we can talk about the terrain out here in this area. Now, this whole position here behind me, you can see the breastworks right over my shoulder right there. That's just kind of sticking up. Today, in some areas, it's tall enough for probably a short man to stand behind and be okay. Back when they were created, they were much higher, and they had that large head log that's on top so that you could get behind it and place your weapon in it and then fire right down the line. This whole area out front was likely cleared off. So you have a lot of woods out here right now. You can see a lot of trees. The area directly in front here was probably cleared off from all of the usage. They needed wood for fires and building structures and things like that. But then just a little bit further off in that direction where Duncan Road is, heading in this direction here, there's a large patch of trees and stuff that would have been in place at that time near Hatcher's Run. So when they talked about the terrain that they had to get through in order to fight the Battle of Hatcher's Run, they're talking about that area out there and over here that looked a lot like the wilderness, with all the underbrush and the large trees that were still in the way. Well, the Battlefield Trust has done it again. So when I came out here about a week or two ago, this sign was so old that at the very top it said Civil War Trust. It did not say the American Battlefield Trust. And it had the Civil War Trails emblem in it as well. But this one does not have Civil War Trails attached to it. What it does have is the emblem for American Battlefield Trust. So it looks like somebody came out here and replaced all the signage that's out here and the information. So that's pretty neat. So I'm now out here at a sign in front of some fortifications at Hatcher's Run. And the sign is so old that it is from the Civil War Trust, civilwar.org, and Virginia civilwartrails.org. So it's been out here for quite a while, but the sign is not roached. It's in really good shape considering everything. Probably because of the shade from the trees during the summertime. On this sign, it talks about these pristine earthworks, and I'm getting chills walking around out here checking this place out because I have not seen these earthworks before, and I've not seen how massive they really are, and it's very untouched. I mean, you can tell that there's a trail out here to walk around and take a look at this place, but it's just absolutely amazing to walk up on something like this, especially in the wintertime, when the leaves are gone and the view is clear all the way across, and you can see what this used to be. You can still see the partitions in between where they would have the wooden partitions up, and they would place cannon into certain locations, and you know, it's just, I don't know, it's outstanding to see something like this. In Spotsylvania, when you go out to that battlefield and you walk that line, if you look over the top of that line, you can see the same exact emplacements, but they're much smaller than what they have out here. This is amazing. We'll get around to showing you some of this stuff. So out here on this sign, I like to read words from soldiers that fought out here in this area. And the 55th North Carolina was out here. And Lieutenant Charles R. Jones from the 55th North Carolina said, "We had never yet fought behind breastworks, although we had constructed miles, but we felt that our line was impregnable." It was an amazing location for them to fight behind. And I'm sure that when they came up here and saw all of this and they were able to pitch themselves behind here, they felt like they were fully protected from the forces that would be coming from that direction over there. Eventually, the Union soldiers do take these lines. So in this location right here behind me, these breastworks, on October 27th of 1864, John Deering's dismounted cavalry was fighting to preserve this location, to keep it from being taken. By February of 1865, Henry Heth's men, who were all out here behind these breastworks, would leave these breastworks and make their way towards Duncan Road. And they would fight in another battle at Hatcher's Run. Eventually, these breastworks would be lost, and the Union soldiers would end up taking this location and inching a little bit further towards victory here in the area where these breastworks are, and Petersburg. It's at this point that Pegram starts to enter into the fight that we're talking about. His men are up and concentrated and moving in a general direction towards Dabney's Mill. And we'll take you over there to see that location where he fell. The Union hadn't gotten very far before Gregg's cavalry was attacked near Gravely Run. And he was attacked by John Pegram's division. Two of Pegram's division struck Crawford at Dabney's Mill. The Federals stuck, and they stuck hard, and they were not going anywhere. Pegram's men fought like hell to get them out of there, but Pegram's men would eventually have to fall back because of the hard fighting that was in front of them. I hope in this video I can convey the size of these earthworks and the long line that I'm actually walking out here. I mean, it's huge. Most times you only see, a handful of breastworks that are still in place and things for you to see, but it's quite amazing how large all of this really is and how much of it still exists out here. I can't believe it myself. But even if you go over to Petersburg National Battlefield and you look at the earthworks there that are in place, they're really not that big. Wow. This is pretty cool. We're going up in through where the earthworks are. One of the corner locations here, most likely artillery area. This is super neat. So out here at this location, again, we have more words from soldiers. Private Richard McBride from the 190th Pennsylvania said, We expected to rush the rebels, but on reaching the creek we found it too deep for fording, and the enemy in good rifle pits on the other bank about 25 yards away. General Nathaniel H. Harris from the Confederate States said, "The old brigade, though worn and thin, was invincible and would have pulled the hinges off the gates of hell if ordered." This is their mindset out here at this fight at Hatcher's Run. It's pretty amazing stuff. So this is the right flank of Robert E. Lee's army. This is the extent of the location. Out here, Lee would have been able to refuse the line. If you ever watch the movie Gettysburg, you'll hear the 20th Maine talking about it. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, "We're going to refuse the line." Bend back on itself. That's what they were able to do here at this location if they needed to. This curvature in the earthwork that's behind me, the breastworks, that's what helped them be able to do that. All throughout the section in front of me here, you would have seen a miniature town pop up. We're talking tents, we're talking wooden structures built from the trees that likely used to be out in this area, rifle pits, earthworks, breastworks. If you were up here where I'm at, you are on duty and you are watching out for the enemy outside of those fortifications. But further back, that's where the supply lines are. That's where everything is. Everything's happening. And soldiers are probably grabbing their meals and discussing what they're going to do on a regular day-to-day basis out here in this location where I'm at right now. Now, this is a very unique perspective that I don't often get when I come out to these fields. If you look behind me here, this is the trail that you take to go in and out of Hatcher's Run battlefield. The breastworks, those tall mounds of dirt right there, are stretching and they are wrapping around me. You see a little bit of a gap here where people have walked through them over the ages, and then they come popping back up over here. I literally can stand here and feel like I'm completely surrounded by earthworks on this corner. That's something you don't normally get when you go out to a battlefield. This is one of the most preserved set of earthworks I've seen on any battlefield. So now I'm out here down on the forward facing or the opposition side of the earthworks. You can see them coming along right here, and the banks are super high. I mean, this is some pretty impressive stuff. There are blue dots out front that kind of take you down a path that runs you down towards the actual Hatcher's Run. Now off in the distance, I can see Hatcher's Run from where I'm standing right now. Right over there. You probably can't see it from here. I am not equipped to cross that muddy stuff right now. I got out here in a pair of basic hiking shoes thinking that I was just going to walk in the woods. And then I got down here and I see streams of water coming through where the earthworks would have been. And the blue dots that run off into the trees here down towards Hatcher's Run itself, which is out in this direction, that is one of the impediments that's out here in this position that we're talking about. And that's where this line takes its name from, and that's where the battle takes its name from, is Hatcher's Run, which is just right over my shoulder. So it's pretty neat to see this. This is the stuff that when you're out there on the trails and you're looking for Civil War trail signs and battlefield trust signs, you're not going to get to see this in your car. You're not going to get to see this on a roadside reading a sign. You'll get a perspective of what happened out here by looking at those signs. But you're not going to get it like this. You got to get out here and get to these trails. And trust you me, I will be coming back better equipped to cross that mud and go see what's on the other side. Because there's a ford area from here that was also a large set of earthworks. It should be out there in those woods somewhere. Maybe we'll get to see it, as long as there's no private property signs posted. Got to respect those laws. So now I've come out front of the encirclement that I talked about in a recent video. You can see the earthworks, the Confederate earthworks are here. The breastworks that were in that U shape at the right flank. A neat perspective now that the sun is out is all down the line here. You can see that the curvature leading up to the earthworks, and you can see the divots that are across in front there, where these embrasures and things were placed out front of these earthworks to keep the enemy from quickly and easily overcoming and jumping over top of these earthworks. If you go to Petersburg National Battlefield, there is a good example out there of what an earthwork would have looked like during the American Civil War. And they have those spikes that are set up out front, and they have the divots that we're talking about. Ignore the sandbags, that's not a real thing. But they have all the dirt and the logs and everything placed in there so that you can see what it would have looked like if you were in a station where there were cannon and men and stuff like that. So I highly recommend checking that out before you come out and see a blank canvas like this, because if you take a look at this, they're not quite as tall as they should be. They look pretty plain. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I could have jumped over that very easily, even if somebody was shooting at me. Sure you could. I highly doubt it. But the way they were built back then, it was almost impossible to overcome these earthworks unless you had a large force of men chopping down things with axes. As a matter of fact, there was a fight that happened over there at Stedman where that's exactly what they did. They had a large forward advance force with axes, chopping down trees and chopping down wood and all kinds of stuff that was out front that was meant to keep men from getting inside. And it worked out pretty good for them. Now, if you get out here in these woods and you're thinking to yourself, waffles, I'm not a hiker. I don't know anything about going out in the woods. I don't have a compass. Well, good news. You don't need one. There's signs posted up everywhere that tell you where to go. There's blue dots on the trees. I mean, you can even see the logs they've laid down on the path out here to kind of guide the way so that you don't get lost. Because trust me, it is very easy to get lost in woods. But they make this path as easy as possible. Now, if you're in a wheelchair, I don't think you're going to be making this trip. So, you can watch this video and kind of get an idea of what this place is like. But otherwise, if you want to come out here and check it out for yourself, you can tell by the walk that I'm walking right now. Not that bad. And best part, if it's the summertime that you want to see this place, all these trees will be leafed out. It'll be nice and quiet out here. There'll be a nice canopy to provide a cover for you. Though the breeze won't be here, the sun won't be peeking through either. Now Lee quickly orders in Finnegan to support Pegram in that fight. And now Pegram's got more men pouring into the field to support his location, and they've got their dander up. And they were making that approach, that attack towards the Union soldiers that we were talking about. And this fight was so intense, it ends up exposing Pegram and many of the other officers in that fight to fire. And unfortunately for Pegram, that would be his last fight. Now with the seesaw action that was happening out here with Pegram, like we said earlier, the Federals had stuck and Pegram's men had to go back across this field and fall back into position to make another go at him. Colonel Henry A. Morrow saw that his men were faltering, and he placed himself out front shouting, "Take heart, man, for God's sake, advance." He ends up grabbing his colors and gets out in front of his men and comes in this direction towards me with those colors, trying to rally his men. Well, the man with the 147th New York on horseback sees that. And the man was Captain James Couey. When he saw that, he rode up to him in that location and he snagged those colors and pulled them out of his hands and proudly waved them and rode in this direction to try to rally those same men. The men, seeing that, let out a loud cheer and turned around and came back towards Morrow and Couey in this general direction towards where Pegram was. The fight continued on, but his men could not carry on the fight the rest of the afternoon, and they end up having to fall back. As a result of his bravery, Couey takes a bullet to the face. He falls off his horse, lays on the ground, and regains consciousness and realizes that his men are running. So he gets back up and he starts to try to rally them again, even though he's been shot in the face. It's a pretty amazing and intense thing to think about. And all of this happened right out here in front of me in this area where I'm at. The location where I'm currently standing now is the place where the monument was placed in honor of Pegram. That monument's right here, just behind me. Off in the general direction in front of me, Pegram's men would have been coming in this direction here. I'll spin around so you can see behind me. If I was a soldier with Pegram's unit, I would have been marching in this direction here, straight on ahead. Now, off in that direction, catty corner coming this way, is where Heth and his men and Evans were headed towards Union soldiers that are off in that direction over there. And you can take that road that's by that's by the Hatcher's Run battlefield area, where you can get to the stop and go out to the earthworks, and you take that all the way down and you'll run into Dabney's Mill Road, and that's how you find this monument over here. If you want to find the monument on GPS, you're going to have to search in Pegram Monument, because this is marked as something that is closed and no longer open on Google, and it's kind of hard to find if you don't know what to search. But there are still signs up out here that are barely readable. I'll even show you one here. This sign, see if I can adjust this down, right here is roached completely, and it was put out here God only knows how long by the CWPT. And CWPT places signs up for people to get orientation in the battlefield, to know exactly where they're standing, and to tell the history, just like the Battlefield Trust is doing today. But it's no longer a visible sign. So if you're going to come out here to this location, watch some videos or read up on it before you get here, because you're not really going to know much by looking at these signs. Shortly after Cooey's hit, Morrow was hit. Now this is his third wounding in the war. Morrow has been hit multiple times. He's actually hit at the Overland Campaign and at a battle prior to that. One more time, he is shot again, and it puts him in a pretty bad situation. So now Fitzhugh Lee, for battlefield orientation, is coming across a road that's out in this direction here, out through these woods, and he is actually coming this way, and Pegram is heading straight on. Fitzhugh Lee comes across this field over here, and the attack, once they finally get out front and start to fight again and move towards the Union soldiers, they found that the Union soldiers were not prepared to fight. Those men turned around and ran, and they ran fast. In fact, it was so fast that a man in the 20th Maine described it as a skedaddle. He says, how we got frightened and skedaddled back through the woods like a flock of frightened sheep, more than a mile, although not being chased. In other words, the soldiers weren't even on their tails. They didn't have anybody chasing them, but they were still so frightened of the fight that was taking place in front of them that they didn't want to get hit. And so they made their way back across these fields as fast as they possibly could. And that's a man with the 20th Maine. These are the heroes of Little Round Top at Gettysburg. They've seen some pretty rough fighting, so you can imagine the fighting here must have been very intense. So somewhere in this stretch of woods here, and it's determined by someone that roughly where this marker is, but who really knows, is when the most significant casualty of this entire fight happened. It was John Pegram. John Pegram was a fairly young man and a promising officer that was fighting for the Confederate Army. 3 weeks prior to this fight, John Pegram was in Richmond, Virginia, and John Pegram was at St. Paul Episcopal Church. The reason why he was there wasn't because of war. He was there because he had won the hand of an eligible woman that everybody in town thought was the most beautiful woman in Richmond, and her name was Hetty. Hetty was marching down the aisle getting ready to be married, and one woman described her with this beautiful pale look, her soft white skin and her flush rosy cheeks the most beautiful bride she'd ever seen. And Pegram and Hetty were arm in arm being wed at that church. And it was such a big event that people like Jefferson Davis had attended the wedding, and his wife. It was a huge event for Richmond, and it was a bright light in a time when there wasn't many things to be happy about in this area for the people that lived in Richmond and Petersburg. And so this big major event takes place, they get married, and then it's back to the battle lines for him. 3 weeks later, John Pegram's out here in this field, and he is directing his men, and he is on his horse, and he's headed in this direction right there in front of me. Major Henry Kidd Douglas would then go on to describe what happened. And he said, General Pegram was shot through the body near the heart. I jumped from my horse and caught him as he fell, and with assistance took him from the horse. He died in my arms just as he touched the ground. That was the end of John Pegram's life, right here in these fields. They boxed him up and they sent him back to Richmond. When he gets back to Richmond, he's laying in state in St. Paul Episcopal Church. His new bride of just 3 weeks is sitting by his coffin and weeping. And as she's there, the very same pastor that married her and her husband is now presiding over his funeral. That is how all of this ends for him and for her. Now, this fight out here, February 5th through the 7th, had many big names that were associated with the fight. But there are a couple men that were also associated with the fight that not many people talk about. And they were a pair of brothers with North Carolina. And those brothers were sharpshooters. This would be the last fighting that they would do in the American Civil War here. The two brothers got caught up in the melee, and both of them would be taken prisoner of war and sent off to a prison camp. William and Bennett Spock is their name. And like we said before, they were sharpshooters. Their paperwork, one of the brothers would be listed as giving himself up to the enemy, as if he walked through the lines and turned himself over. It was actually not a true statement, and it come to find out they had been fighting here together as sharpshooters, and they were taken captive during this big fight out here at Hatcher's Run. Well, what does this fight achieve out here exactly? Not a whole heck of a lot. The fighting itself was intended to keep Lee busy, and that's exactly what it did. And it sacrificed a little over 2,000 Union soldiers in the process. There were a little over 1,000 Confederate casualties out here on this field too, for these 3 days battle that happened out here at Hatcher's Run. So, as far as strategic planning is concerned, there's not a lot. There's not a lot that was achieved here. It did advance the lines just a little bit further around the Confederate flank, and it extended it out even further. But at that point, the Confederates were so stretched thin that they couldn't even get soldiers out there if they wanted to. And they weren't about to extend their lines even further than what they already were, just to save face. So, it wasn't until a little bit later on that a breakthrough happens, not too far from where I'm standing right now. off in these woods over here, out at a place now called the Pamplin State Historic Park. You can actually see the breakthrough line, and it's a location where a couple of Medal of Honors were awarded as well to soldiers that fought there. It's a pretty neat park to go check out, and we might even go over there and see if we can't get a couple of quick videos on the inside. But it wasn't until then that something real significant starts to happen out here. And even the battle at Five Forks, I mean, that kind of did it in too. So it was a whole collective group of things. This position really wasn't anything more than keeping Lee busy. And that's what it did. So Hatcher's Run is a little bit of a moderate hike. It's not that bad. Nothing really uphill. Flat area, a lot of gravel down. Some areas are very wet, especially right now since it snowed not too long ago. And I'd say the trail overall, maybe 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles tops. So it's really not that bad to stretch your legs and get out here and check this place out. Now, when you come out here, there's gonna be a sign and a gate, and the gate's gonna look like it's closed off and you can't get in. You walk past that gate to get to the battlefield and head in this direction. That sign is only part of it. As soon as you walk past that gate and you look directly ahead, there will be a wooden post with an arrow. It'll turn you to the right. Follow that wooden post down till you see a small looking house. There's another sign there, and then that wraps you around to turn back in the direction you came from to see another post with an arrow. When you come out from there, you need to follow the blue dots back down the straight direction away from your vehicle, because at the end of that loop, there's not another post that tells you to take a right. You're going to follow it that direction, and in about 1/2 mile or so, you're going to see some of the biggest earthworks you've ever seen. So definitely do not stop until you see those massive earthworks. It is worth the trip. And then follow them all the way down and come back around. You're not going to regret it, that's for sure. Well, I wish I could stay out here all day and play around in these woods and check out all the earthworks that are out there. Some of these earthworks in this location are still part of private property, so kind of have to obey the rules sometimes and make sure that you're not trampling around on someone else's property. This has been an amazing and beautiful trip here on a Sunday. It's trips like these, getting out on these fields, being out here in these woods. This is what makes all of this worthwhile, you know, these experiences, these moments, discovering something for yourself for the first time, and then I get to share it with you guys here on my YouTube channel. So really appreciate you coming and checking out the video. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. That's what keeps me going. And hit that like button down there at the bottom, the thumbs up, if you like the video. If you don't like the video, tell me you don't like the video. Put a comment in the comment section and tell me what you don't like about it. It helps me improve the video and the quality, and you can just ask some of my followers. Over the last couple of years, we've done things like adjust the music, adjust the sound, the quality, slow the footage down so that people can see the areas a lot better, and also take a little bit less of me in the videos and a little bit more of the area. So definitely open to change. So until next time, this is History with Waffles. Oh, and by the way, coming up, we have a couple of live feeds or live streams that are going to happen on this channel. One of which is going to be with author Jeff Shera. So that's going to be a very interesting live stream, and we might even have Mr. Beat on here as one of the co-anchors, if you will, for that interview with Jeff Scherer. So stay tuned. Come back for more.